Hey, this is Adam. Just wanted to pop on here before we started today's conversation and tell you about a really exciting event that we're going to be a part of this fall, October 6th at Bound Bookshop in York, Pennsylvania. We are so excited to be participating in the book launch for Madison Tyler Nelson's Portrait of a Haunting. This is just an incredible book that I think so many people are going to really love and enjoy. So we are so excited, one, to have had a conversation with her that you'll hear on the pod, but also in person being part of the book launch on release day at Bound Bookshop in York. Tickets are free at boundbookshop.com, and we hope to see all of our friends in the mid Atlantic area to come celebrate this really special book. All right, on to the conversation. Welcome back to Horrifically Well Read, Bled, and Said. I am so excited today to be talking to AP Thayer, the author of Tapeworm, which is releasing August 18th from a new imprint, Evil Twin. I'm really excited to talk to you. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So, this book, as soon as I saw the cover, I was like, this looks awesome. And it was. I love this book.
Thank you.
But I just yeah, so to start off with, it says right on the cover, "A Vampire Tale," but tell everybody they're not getting kind of their usual vampire from this book, right?
Yeah,
What is
for
what
sure.
what is tapeworm?
Well, there are two kind of like horror tropes that I'm trying to play with in this one. And the first one is vampirism. And I'm trying to go beyond the like Western centric nobility, like pale white gothic kind of vampire and explore some of the other types of vampiric creatures and horrors that exist in other parts of the world as well. And the second trope is just like the cabin in the woods trope. So instead of in the woods, I put it in a desert.
Yeah, love that. Awesome. And, one thing that I really loved about this book is it would be a fascinating human drama if none of the supernatural things even occurred, right?
Thank you.
Like, and, honestly, like, I think about sort of aging and, I'm in 42, and some of the things that you talk about and kind of go through in this book, it's sort of like they're past college, they're fully adults, people are married, and now people are getting divorced, and it's kind of like, how do you stay friends? Do you wanna stay friends? Do you really have anything to do do you have anything in common anymore with people? And you kind of throw them all in this, situation where they're awkwardly having to cohabitate, and it's supposed to be fun, right?
Yeah, yeah, 100%. Yeah. They're on the cusp of middle age or right beginning in the middle of age. And as someone who is going through that and has gone through that, I'm 39 turning 40 this year. That part of the story was actually more difficult for me to write in terms of like putting myself in the headspace of like all these different relationships. And like I had to after several hours of writing, I had to be like, okay, I need a break. I can't be like this bummed out about
Yeah.
like everyone's life.
No, it's so true, and it's funny because it's one of those things where, like, I absolutely hate it when people are like, "Oh, I didn't like this character or that character," and, our main character here, Victor, who is going through a divorce, and, it's one of those things where I think a lot of people have dealt with when there's a breakup and your friend group knows you as this couple, like you've been friends as this couple, what happens when you break up? And, you
Yeah.
really explore that in an interesting way. But I think that, you don't hide the fact that Victor isn't a perfect person, right? You're in his head and his head is a messy ass place to be like
Yes, it is very
oftentimes
much so.
and I think that sometimes in my mind, when someone says they find someone unlikable, what probably are really saying is they identify a little bit more than they want to with some of the things that are happening, right?
You may be right for sure. I've seen writing this book and publishing this book, I was fully expecting people to say these are unlikable characters, and plenty of people have said that since. And yeah, I think there's a lot of unlikable aspects in all these people. And I was hoping that, however deeply flawed these people are, especially Vic, the main character, that
Mhm.
there's still, maybe some hope, maybe some redeeming qualities. Everything's really complex and like what everyone's reality is a little bit different anyway. So that's some of the stuff I wanted to play with.
Yeah, I think that one of the things when it gets to the supernatural as well is there's no easy answers. And I think that, in real life, there are no easy answers. And I think that a lot of these characters are trying to do the best that they can in situations, but like life is so messy.
Yeah,
And something that I really loved about that is when one little part is exposed, that one little ship, the pierce and the water starts coming out, you realize all these other kinds of cracks. And like I love that that is what is kind of like exposed in all of these relationships and dynamics that are happening, that it really is like a Jenga house of cards. And it really
yeah, yeah,
it isn't anyone's fault necessarily. And I think that's
no,
really it's pretty realistic to relationships, but I love how real that is. And is that something just, looking at relationships around you, noticing, kind of as you go along with friendships that's happening, or
yeah, for
where did the
sure.
dynamics? Yeah.
I feel like I've lived many lives. I've moved around a lot. I've done all kinds of things. I've met all kinds of people, and I just feel like humans are so complicated and flawed. And as I've gotten older, and it's been difficult, I've tried to be more forgiving of people, especially people in my life who now, I feel like I've got like just a tiny bit of wisdom and I can see a little bit from other people's perspective. And, hopefully the same grace is extended to me because I know I'm very imperfect.
Yeah, I think that, as I get older and I look back on like maybe moments or things that have happened and I've been like, oh man, at the time I was so mad at
Yeah.
whatever person or whatever. And I look back and now I'm like, well, I did not react well in that
Yeah.
situation, like and I love, like, even throughout this book, I think that a lot of the characters, but especially Vic, does have those moments where he's like and you might not even, like, say it out loud, or you might not even go to that person and apologize or whatever, but I think that
Sure.
first step of just being like, "Ooh, that was not the right way to do it," is, like,
Yeah.
one of those processes of, like, growing up that can be painful, but it really definitely kind of makes things going forward a little bit easier.
Yeah. It's kind of cathartic to be able to look at yourself in the past and be like, oh, that was a mistake. That was something that I shouldn't have done or I handled poorly. Um, I don't know if Vic fully gets there. I think there's a lot
Yeah,
of times where he gets, like, right up to the line, and it's, like, right in front of him, and then he just kinda misses it, but,
yeah.
you know.
You're like, "I think he gets it. I think no, okay.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah,
he's got a lot going on here in this
yeah,
book
true.
anyway. We can forgive him for that."
Yeah,
But the other thing that I really love, and I don't know when it was, when some point in the '30s when I realized that if you spend a night drinking or any of that kind of stuff, your next day sucks so much, and it did not suck before. So watching these guys, especially, Vic, when he has his moments when they first get there, when it's like, "Oh, man," like, you just don't feel the same way.
yeah, it's like youth is there until it isn't, and you're like, "Oh, it's gone." Like,
Yeah, it
I
seemed
can't
like
do
it
those
yeah,
things anymore.
it's such a great idea to go out and party in the desert until,
Yeah,
you have to wake up the next day, but definitely wanna talk about, that setting, which is incredible. So, it's really its own character, like, in multiple ways before anything starts happening, because you really kinda mess with reality in this book too, where it's like, "Wait, was that house there? Wasn't there houses here?" Like,
yeah,
those
yeah,
kind of things, which I just absolutely love, that kind of thing when it's happening, but even before that, this has been a place in their lives that has been really special, but it's also really out in the middle of nowhere. It can be so fun when you're with these friends there, but then at the same time, when it's not so fun, it can be really terrifying, right?
yeah, and you're out in the desert, and you've all gone to this island basically, and it's like, if you're getting along, cool, but if not, where do you go? How do you get space? Like, how do you talk to each other?
Yeah, absolutely, and there really is not much of a choice, and sometimes going out, you're like, "Oh, I'm gonna get a, breath of fresh air or whatever," and you go out and it's like, "Oh, it's not so great out here,"
Yeah, it's
especially
pretty
in this.
hot out here, kinda dusty.
So, I wanna talk about, like you said, this vampire tale and sort of the supernatural things that are happening are much different than Interview with the Vampire,
Yeah, for sure.
and
For sure.
I love that sort of at the very beginning, like, very early on, the reader knows not exactly what it is that's happening, but that what's happening is really like, there's this entity essentially that is kind of, like, on the prowl, and it really kind of as a reader, I was like, "These guys don't know how much in trouble they are," and I love the suspense that that creates, so I wanna just kind of think about your or d talk about your thought process of those kind of, like, POV chapters from the bad guy or whatever you wanna call it.
Well, definitely shout out to my editor. They they suggested this early on, and, I kinda fought it. I really wanted the story to be just one perspective,
Mhm.
and, they stuck with it, and clearly, I agree now completely that it was the right move. I think that was so smart of them to have me, "Why don't you write some chapters in, like, a different po in the point of view of the worms and, like, see how
Yeah,
it feels," and all, and, yeah, honestly, I think it really did a really good job of setting up the suspense, of, giving you some information that you wouldn't otherwise get,
right.
because if you're stuck with Vic the whole time, you're really only getting what he's seen through his eyes. So, yeah, I was thankful to them. Shout out TJ Oler, and, yeah, I was glad to get that opportunity.
Yeah, and so the mythology, the rules, all of that kinda stuff of the worms, as you said, where did some of that come from?
I think the cosmic horror aspect of it is pretty obvious. There are entities we don't understand, ancient, you don't know what they want, how they operate. But I also really wanted to explore some of my own culture and background and, like, Mesoamerican tales and folklore. So, for example, like, the hummingbirds are, in Aztec mythology, hummingbirds and butterflies are warriors that have died well and are in the underworld, and that's what they get turned into. So, in my mind, I had these hummingbird warriors that were protecting the world and keeping this thing caged.
That's really cool, yeah. I think that one of those things, when it comes to cosmic horror and then that kind of stuff that's so frightening is, we kind of look at everything as human perspective of, these are the things that you want. This is, you can reason with all that kind of stuff. And when it's so powerful and it's so far out of our scope of things, it really is terrifying. And you kind of tap into that really nicely in this one. But it also, some of the marketing and things, it's like From Dusk Till Dawn meets The Thing and, like, things like that. I think that the sort of thing that you really tap into really well is that idea of and I'm trying to think of some movies where I think it was Race with the Devil when they see something and then they are on the run, but you never know who is friend and who is an enemy, and I love that aspect in this book too, where someone that could have been 1 second ago is now not.
Yeah.
And the sort of paranoia that kind of, comes with that is really cool too.
Yeah, and I also wanted to, you just mentioned the, like, not knowing. There's definitely moments that I wrote in that I wanted even the reader to not know, like, what does this entity want?
Mhm.
Why is one person turning right away and why is the other one not for a very long time? And, like,
Yeah.
what's the plan here? What's the
Mhm.
goal?
Yeah, definitely, and, another thing that I really love about this book is it is an adult book. Like, it
Yeah,
is
very much.
because and a lot of times vampires and, like, sex and that kinda stuff, always kinda go hand in hand because there's that intimacy, involved with it, and while it doesn't follow the same sort of rules of that, I think that the fact that Vic is exploring his sexuality, all of this kind of things that are going on within the book, I think it really kind of mirrors each other really interestingly, and I think that going there, in certain scenes and thoughts and stuff that, they're having really kind of gets to the heart of like Vic having this identity crisis of who I am now, as
Mhm.
well as just like sort of as you age, everyone kind of going through that of like, what is it that I actually want, right?
Yeah, who am I? Who have I become? Yeah, I mean, I definitely strayed from the regular vampire stuff, but I did wanna have the seduction and the, like, being enchanted a little bit, and, for someone who's so unmoored now because of the separation that he's going through, he's perfect fodder for this kind of manipulation.
Yeah, and I love that he's kind of like tagged the second like he gets into town. It's kind of
Yeah.
like that's one and like you said, sometimes it's immediate attack, that kind of thing, but it was like he was almost like specially, picked
Yeah.
for
Yeah,
the
for
events that
sure, for
happen here,
sure.
which is really cool. But yeah, it definitely like the it has like elements of zombie, you get into some like gnarly body horror. Just how much fun is it to write, like, when you're like, "Okay, shit's gonna hit the fan," and readers, when you get to the point where the shit hits the fan, it is a very, very big fan that
Yeah,
it hits.
for sure.
Where it like, that had to have been, like, as you were writing, as you're saying, there's this really great relationships, things that you're going through and stuff, but I know you're probably thinking in your head, it's leading to this, where when you finally got there, where you're like, "Oh, hell yeah, let's do this thing now."
Yeah, for sure, and, this was kind of when I started writing this, I was like, "I really wanna push myself in terms of, how smutty I'm writing and how graphically I'm writing in this one, because a lot of my other work doesn't really hit those levels." And as I was writing it, I was just really trying to, like, get at some of the things that would, like, viscerally get to me and, like, have, like, tiny details that, like, even as I was writing them it was, like, tense.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think there's some scenes towards the end, especially involving actions in the swimming pool.
Yeah.
I was just like going back and I was like, what did that say? Like, kind of thing where it was just it like was awesome. Like I definitely, that juxtaposition again of like it went from this really, sexy moment to the exact opposite, and I
Yeah.
love the way that horror can do that, can play on those things where, we are sort of attracted to the dark thing
For
until
sure.
we realize how dark it is, right?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure, and, how fragile the, like, sense of safety and control can be.
Yeah, absolutely, and how quick reality can, the smallest things in reality changing can leave you completely off balance, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, awesome. So there's some twists and turns in this book, and I always am interested to learn with authors. Did you have this like outline? Did you have like an ending in mind as you started writing? Because this is definitely a book that you don't quite realize how much it is leading to something until you're there, which
Mhm.
was really awesome as a reader. It hit me like I wrote here like a ton of bricks. I was like, fuck. So, did you always kind of have that end game in mind as you started it?
Yeah, when I started writing this, I knew it was a tragedy. I knew that, no one's getting out alive. This is, you know, like, it started as an exploration of, growing older and all these
Mhm.
things, and it was just like everyone is doomed in their own different way.
Yeah.
And I knew at the end it was gonna be, you know without spoiling, it was gonna be like the one person, Vic,
Mhm.
and this kind of like faux moment of coming together,
Yeah.
but we know that it's like it doesn't mean anything and that
Mhm.
they're both doomed.
Yeah. And even before that, I think that the way that you kind of create hope of, reconciliation of like, okay, like there's been this horrible tragedy, but maybe it'll end up, good for at least these people, that kind of stuff. And then it's just like that rug just getting pulled out,
Yeah,
which Absolutely love that. So it's always interesting too, like what kind of inspirations, do you have for like your work and maybe specifically for this, whether it's horror wise or not, that kind of influence you and what you do?
For sure, Fernanda Melchor, she wrote Hurricane Season.
Hmm.
That's one of my all-time favorite books, and it's a really great example of, like, a very difficult read, both physically because of the style, but also just, like, the themes that she's talking about, and, I as I was reading it, I was just, like, tense the whole time,
Yeah.
and when I finished it, I was like, "That's one of the best book experiences I've ever had." So definitely that, and then, Samantha Schweblin, another one who, like Fever Dream and Mouthful of Birds, when I first read them, I was like, "How can something so, like, simple and almost mundane hold so much dread within it?"
Yeah.
So yeah, those 2 definitely are a big part of my writing.
Yeah. That's awesome. I love that. Like, dread, intention, and that not even realizing, because I think there was moments when I was reading this book too where I don't realize that I am, like, sort of tense and holding it, and then, like, someone says something and you're like, "Ah, what are you doing?" Definitely, those moments which I absolutely love
Well,
in
good, I'm
here.
glad.
Have you always been, like, a horror fan, or has that always been a part of, an
Yeah, I would
outing?
say fantasy was my first love just
Okay.
because my dad read me Lord of the Rings when I was, like, 2 or 3 years old, but, shortly thereafter, they got me the, like, Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark books, and, those stories were awesome, the art in them was
Yeah.
so cool, and then from there, I feel like plenty of horror writers went through the, like, Goosebumps, Are You Afraid of the Dark kind of pathway, so I'm
Now
not unique in that,
we
and yeah,
definitely,
I
yeah,
just
like, we're right around that same age, and it's like the
yeah.
Scholastic Book Fair definitely.
Yeah, exactly, for sure, and, then I got into horror movies. I think I started with, like, Evil Dead 1 and 2, and I was just like, "This is awesome."
I don't know if I I remember it's so funny, like, I guess when I became a horror fan, it was like, the mid I was all we grew up where it was no thing to as an 8 or 9-year-old to rent Friday the 13th movies, like, on the weekend and stuff like that. I don't know if that was the same for you, but it was this weird, like, black hole of, like, certain movies, like, in the mid-90s and stuff. I remember Evil Dead being so hard to find, and I lived in Washington, DC. I wasn't in, like, some weird, like, place where stuff was hard to find, but it's so funny how much you had to search for things back then,
Yeah,
or just
I was
kinda
lucky that at the time, I was at boarding school, and my roommate had copies of the VHSs and, like, a little TV with the VCR on it, so we
attached to.
would just watch it over and over and over again.
That's awesome. Like, I can't imagine, yeah, that's funny. Boarding school must have been a definite, experience.
For sure, yeah, you know?
Was that, like, high school or, like.
Yeah, it was high school. My parents, moved out of the country, and so my education options where they moved were limited. They're like, "Oh, well, let's try boarding school," and so I went up to a boarding school in New England, which made me fall in love with New England. I didn't
Mm,
love the school, but the New England itself, I still dream about autumn in New England just because
yeah.
how beautiful it is. And then, I was like a 13-year-old and we were in college dorms essentially, and there was like very little control or anything. So yeah, I watched a bunch of horror movies, a bunch of things I shouldn't have probably, had a lot of fun, and yeah, definitely helped the horror lover in me.
Yeah, that's always interesting, like, when you're at a place like that, are you allowed to, like, leave and go experience, like, the surrounding area and town, or is it something that, like, you do as a school, or, like, that's always.
So you could, but we were way out in the middle of nowhere. So town was literally 4 buildings, and one of them was a laundromat slash store, like gas station store kind of thing. So, we were pretty limited.
Yeah, that's funny. I mean, that's like a breeding ground for a horror lover, that's for sure, I'm
Yeah,
sure.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was and my first, I won't call it a supernatural experience because I'm a skeptic, but
Mhm.
my first, you know, thing that happened to me that I can't explain was, walking home late at night by myself. I saw this just like really hulking, massive dog and, just like freaked me out.
Yeah.
You know, just kinda like the perfect ground for that because 'cause we're out in the middle of nowhere, campus is surrounded by woods, and I was like, "What the hell is that? I gotta get out of here."
Was it just chilling? Like, did it like it was
It just it, like, walked maybe 50 yards in front of me from, like, behind one building to another, and I was like, "That's I gotta go."
see, in DC one time, I saw the cat walking through the alley, and I was like, "Oh, man, it's probably shouldn't have a cat walking around." Then I looked at its tail, realized it was a rat. It was just that big.
Whoa.
So, that's a little bit different of an experience, but, no, I can't help but hear that you said that was my first, assuming
Yeah.
there was ones after that. Like, that's it's
Yeah, there's
even though
2
you're
other one
yeah,
I've been able to explain away. The 3rd one was just, kind of like the regular late at night feeling of something coming down the hallway towards me and being on the other side of the door,
mhm,
and it was just, like it was unique in the, like, emotion that I was feeling at that time. It was very like, "Oh, like, this is very different and scary."
yeah,
But then the next morning, we found out that someone down the hall had had a stroke or heart attack or something and was just, like, laying on the floor. So, I'm
okay.
like, "Hmm, like, probably coincidence," or, like, who knows?
Yeah, that's pretty crazy, I definitely was always and would say I still am, a skeptic for the most part for things. As you kinda live, there's so many things that you're like, "What the hell was that?"
Yeah.
Coincidences, that kind of stuff. I just watched the original The Haunting of Hill House, the original movie
Mhm.
that was based on that, and there's that one section where the doctor talks about the preternatural and how we just can't explain it right now, but,
Yeah, for
things that
sure.
were supernatural 100 years ago are just part of science now, and I'm like, "Okay, maybe, certain things like that," but there's definitely some weird stuff out there, so
Yeah.
that's pretty
Yeah,
cool.
I like to say that there's a lot that, just we don't understand, that we're not able to sense fully, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, especially if it ends up like in this book, it can stay, I don't need to sense any of that kinda stuff.
So you said
But
you were in
that
DC, right?
yeah,
Were you there when The Blair Witch came out?
yeah, yeah, I was
So I
actually
w
about to talk about that.
Really? So I went to middle school in Bethesda, Maryland,
Okay.
and when the Blair Wi when the Blair Witch movie came out, I don't know
Mhm.
if you remember, but it was, like, almost marketed as if, like, this is a real
Yeah.
movie that was made by these people and we found it.
Mhm.
And, I was 10, something like that, so I fully believed it. And
Yes.
me and my friends were so freaked out because it's like, "Oh, this happened in Maryland. It's only, like, an hour away." Like, yeah.
I, uh I remember because Sci-Fi Channel had, like, a little documentary that came on before it came out. That was, like, a straight up documentary about, like, the Blair Witch and kind of hyping
Yeah.
it up and everything, and I remember that distinctly, and, I was 15 when it came out, and we actually got, like, passes to go see it before like, a few weeks
Ooh.
before it came out or whatever, and yeah, it had a huge effect. I immediately went out and bought, like, a camcorder and was walking around trying to, like, find weird stuff and all that
Yeah.
kind of thing, and that's what I was saying, like, I went searching for it, like, by myself. I was like, "I'll sit in any creepy place." Like, I grew up next to a cemetery and as well. So, like, we would do all kinds of stupid stuff, like, or I would,
Sure,
but
yeah.
nothing ever happened, So
Yeah,
it was very
unfortunately.
much like, that. But yes, Blair Witch, and we actually I forget where we were going because I live in Pennsylvania, like, just across the Maryland border now,
Yeah.
and we were driving somewhere and ended up in Burkittsville, Maryland,
Okay.
and, that's where Blair Witch, supposedly happened, and it is, like, you would never know you're in Maryland, at least, my experience with Maryland is definitely Bethesda, Baltimore, those kinds of places,
Yeah.
and I was like, 1, you're in the actual mountains, like, I was like, "I didn't know there was mountains in, like,
Yeah.
Maryland like that," and then it is just like, there is nothing. It is, like, horrifying. We stopped at, like, some gas station, and they had, like, pig's feet on the counter and stuff. I'm like, "When did I end up in, like, the Mississippi Delta? Like, what the hell is
Yeah, like,
happening here?" So, yeah, it was
Maryland
definitely
definitely
like
has the, like, urban areas, but it also has the, like, we are right next to West Virginia
yep.
areas.
And that's definitely where Burkittsville is, so but, yeah, I love found footage, like, any of that kinda stuff, like, always love, so that was a huge, like, formative thing. I think I went to see it, like, 4 or 5 times in the theater, begging people to buy tickets for me and stuff, so which was always like the fun thing as a horror fan too. But hopefully, boarding school in the middle of the woods comes up in your work going forward. That sounds like a good setting.
Yeah, there's definitely like, I definitely wanna use that as a setting, and I've kind of played around it a couple of times for different stories, but right now it's in the back burner.
Yeah. Well, one thing that's really cool is that this is like that evil twin, right? It's Xando that starting this new thing, and you're the first book that's coming
First
out,
one,
right?
yeah. Yeah.
And they have went all out, like, the design of this book is beautiful, you got sprayed edges, all that kinda stuff. What's that like? How's that feel? Is that, like, responsibility? Are you, like, super excited about it or both?
It's definitely both. I was very surprised, pleasantly so, but, going the traditional publishing route, it's like, I knew what my expectations were. I knew what to expect as a debut author and all these things. And the whole way through, I've been very pleasantly surprised by how much energy Evil Twin is putting behind it. Yeah, the design of the book is fantastic. They're already recording an audiobook. And yeah, it's a little overwhelming at times when they send me emails and they're like, "Hey, we're doing this, that, or the other," and I'm just like, "Damn, okay."
I can only imagine. Like, I would be I'll probably listen to the audiobook too because there's some things in this book that will probably be really interesting to see how they do as audio, especially, like, those chapters that we talked about, like, that are kind of from the worm's POV and stuff, like,
Yeah.
that's really cool. And do they normally, I've heard they kinda send you a few different people to say, like, "Who do you like?" And then what's that process been like, kind of
So
deciding that?
it was very cool. They asked me like, "What kind of voice do you envision for this?" And I said, "Oh, well, this, that, or the other." And they sent me 6 people who auditioned, and it was the same scene each time. It was the same first night when he's going to bed hungover or
Yeah.
drunk and is
Mhm.
just vomited and he's naked and afraid and,
Yep.
sad, and hearing that read in these 6 professional voices in different ways, it was like someone else's story. It was like someone else's book. I'm just like, "Whoa, this is crazy."
Yeah. That's like a full circle moment of like, okay, 6 people are reading my work. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. It feels like I'm an observer, you know? I'm just like, "Yeah, this is happening to someone," you know?
Yeah, that's so awesome. And again, the cover is just beautiful. Did you have any input in that, as to what you were looking for?
Yeah, again, another moment when I was surprised. They asked me, you know, send them some inspiration, some thoughts, some ideas, and they took basically everything I said, and I asked for an artist who was Latino or Latina, and
Mhm.
they found one, and it's a phenomenal cover. I mean, I don't know what else to say about it. It's just
Yeah,
crazy.
it is. Yeah, it's incredibly eye-catching. It's gonna definitely pull people in just from that. So, like, I always love to hear, like, for any book release, it's always special, to have it out there and for people to be reading it. But this to be like your first, your debut novel coming out to see, do you have plans for it? Whether it's like personal or like out in a store or something like that. How are you going to celebrate that?
Celebrating's not my forte. Like, other people have to tell me to do that kinda thing.
Yeah.
And actually, honestly, I haven't even thought of something. There's a mini book tour that's gonna happen, and I think in my mind, I was thinking, like, "Yeah, that's the celebration." But no, there hasn't been. I don't know, maybe I'll do a dinner with my friends or something like that.
Yeah. Are you somewhere on release day or for the tour?
Yeah, I will
Okay.
be all that will be announced in a couple weeks. I don't think I'm allowed
Mhm.
to share it yet,
Yeah, yeah.
but
Oh, okay, but you will be, yeah, so that's
yeah,
always nice 'cause, the way schedules are and sometimes it's like, I've had, friends and stuff that it's maybe the weekend before they get to actually, like, celebrate and do those things, so that's really
yeah.
cool. And did I see also you have a second book lined up with Evil Twin that's already scheduled as well, right?
Yes, that is correct. That is what I'm currently working on right now.
Okay, like
Yeah,
edits and stuff like that,
yeah,
so yeah. That's another thing, when I look at the process that it goes through, especially traditional publishing and, indie and self even too, where you're going through it 2 or 3 times. And traditional can be way more than that, right? Just that process, like, what is that like, as you're
It was
going through it? How do you keep your, like, energy up for this story?
it helps to have, like, a good team. I mean,
Mhm.
my agent, Helen Lane, is phenomenal. She's always been a cheerleader, and, TJ Oler is a fantastic editor. I mean, them and I, when we talk about the book, we'd, like, so often see eye to eye and understand each other, and so, like, I have my own hype for my own work, obviously, but
Yeah, yeah.
when there are other professionals that have some of that hype too,
Mhm.
it's I mean, it certainly multiplies my own hype.
Yeah, absolutely, that's awesome. I think that when people get a hold of this, and the people that I know that have read it, they're like, "This is." I think that you're a new voice in horror that is really needed, and I'm really
Thank
excited
you.
for people to get a hold of it. I love, like, they talk about horror being this sort of like reflection of society and the genre that kind of like doesn't blink where other places do. And I think that, we have a lot of whatever you want to call literary fiction that explored like some of the themes that are in here. But I think that putting people into these extreme situations and then kind of playing with their psyche, how would they react in these situations is so fascinating. And so, um, the cast of characters that you've created here, they're all so different, and they all do react very differently. As you're writing that and sort of saying, "Okay, this is gonna happen to this person, this is gonna happen to that person," how do you sort of approach the way that they're going to react? Because it's not sometimes you think, this character's doing that because it's serving the plot, like, it moves things forward. I don't think that your characters necessarily react that way. Sometimes they react in ways that you would think is probably more difficult as a writer to, like, figure out what to do next. So, like, I love that, and, I've talked to different authors that kind of have pages about different characters and things that have happened. How did you sort of differentiate and get into the minds of each of these people?
But when it came down to it and I had to get into the mind of all these people, a lot of it is drawn from experience. It's from people I've seen. Obviously, I haven't seen anyone go through these horrific things,
Yeah.
but I've seen the way people, react to someone else doing a certain thing over and over again. I've seen the way, how jealousy can play out in someone in this way and like the kinds of damage that can do to your decision making process. So I just kind of wanted to draw from that and to really show that, like, these are people and sometimes they do kind of dumb things and sometimes they don't. And they all are going to have different reactions. And sometimes they'll react one way and then like grow to a different way within the same thing. So, yeah, just humans are complicated. And
Yeah, definitely, and, I love the sort of, thing because horror in general, and I feel like especially, like, I think of myself going to the bookstore in the '90s and the 2000s, and, the horror section, if there was one, was Stephen King, Dean Koontz, and Anne Rice, you know what I mean?
yeah,
It
yeah.
was very white, it was very non-diverse, and so seeing, books that for me personally, it's like, I love the fact that it is bringing in folklore and, areas and that kind of stuff that I would never be able to learn or experience without really, purposefully doing that. And a book like this opens me to be like, that's a really cool thing that you talked about with the butterflies and the hummingbirds. I want to look up, more of that. Is that, something that you're thinking about as you're writing? How important is that? You kind of said, I want to bring in sort of my experience and my beliefs and things into it. And while I don't think anyone should feel like, obviously it's not your responsibility to teach people like things and stuff like that. It's got to be really cool too to know that you have a book that's going to be out there that is from that perspective, right?
Yeah, it definitely is cool. And it does feel like a responsibility also. You know, I'm really proud of my identity. It's something that growing up, because I moved so much, I lived in different countries, it was really fractured. And it's only been in the last 10, 15 years that I've really started to like discover myself a bit more, get in touch with like the cultural side of my history.
Mhm.
And so these are things that I just think about and I want to explore. And one of the ways of exploring them is by writing about them. But at the same time, like I said, I feel this responsibility because, horror, I feel like is having a pretty big boom right
Mhm.
now. and there are a lot of really great voices out there. And I want to make sure that I am, teaching and introducing people, but at the same time, I want people to know that, no group of people is a monolith. There's going to be a wide spectrum of experiences between people, and hopefully I get that across.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's amazing, definitely. And, I think this book definitely will accomplish that in a really great way. I think that that's really interesting, especially because it kind of reflects that sort of point in life that you're talking about in this book of sort of tapping into what are my roots, especially if you, not that you weren't allowed to have them, but, just experience of moving around to different places and kind of having to get your bearings to fit in and all that kind of stuff. It's like you kind of put your own thing to the wayside sometimes. So being able to sort of tap into that's probably really cool. And, what kind of ways are you doing that?
I because of how I grew up, I traveled a lot.
Hmm.
And then there was a long stretch of my life where I stopped traveling,
Yeah.
mostly having to do with like financial reasons, but all kinds of stuff. And it's only been in the last few years again that I've started traveling a bit more again. And, just meeting other people, experiencing other things, getting outside of my own bubble because I'm learning things all the time about myself, other people, my culture, other people's cultures. It's just kind of refreshing to like get out of this like insular life that can kind of take shape when you're like I mean, I live in Los Angeles, so there's a lot of stuff here, but, I'm in my apartment, I'm in my neighborhood, I'm with my friends, and it's like the world can get really small, and it's not a small world.
Yeah, absolutely. That's funny because that's kind of like a lot of the themes in this book kind of reflect that, right? Because and it's funny too because, like, it makes me think, what happened, Vic and Trish as they're going through this sort of, like, divorce. It is, like, the little things that kind of add up every day to bring people together or apart,
Yeah,
and kind of like that purposefully realizing that, and a lot of times you do get so insular and it's like, "Look, I'm just worried about what I'm eating for lunch today. I'm just, I need to go to work," and all that kind of stuff, and sort of like having that focus on sort of I'm not going to continue to be in that insular bubble. It can be really difficult, right? Because of just the way the life is. So getting out and looking at that one, it's probably great because it, from a mental health perspective, not worrying about your own shit all the time. But it also, as a writer, I'm sure it's inspiration too, right?
yeah, yeah, I gotta get out there and try and live a lot of things to see what's interesting, what gets me excited.
Nice. So, do you see yourself staying in the horror genre, or do you see? Because I would say like cosmic horror is almost where a lot of times horror and fantasy meet, so that kind of makes
Mhm.
sense. That's your starter. What kind of things are you interested in the future?
Yeah, so, I mean, the next book is horror as well.
Hmm.
It's also set in California. I always have this, I wanna explore California a bit more. This one will be up in the redwoods in the Sierras.
Amazing.
But, yeah, there's definitely fantasy and science fiction stories that are on the back. I love all of those genres, and I love mixing genres as well, like, space horror rocks.
Yes.
There's never enough, in my opinion, and
Agreed. Yeah.
that would be cool. But yeah, I definitely have these stories and ideas and outlines and drafts of certain chapters for fantasy and science fiction.
Yeah, love that. I mean, I could see you doing a book that would put Event Horizon to shame for like the horrors that you could show. So I'm super excited for everything that you have coming in the
Thank you.
future. Definitely will be pushing this book on everyone. Very excited. It's a perfect like August 18th. Like, this is an August 18th book. This is the height of like heat and
Yep.
summer and all of that. So excited for that. But yeah, I wish you all best of luck. Thank you so much for talking. This
Thank
was
you. No,
wonderful.
thanks
Yeah.
for having me. This was
Yeah.
it's been really fun to talk about all this stuff.
Yeah, definitely. So, all right. Well, you have a great rest of your night and good luck and good fortune on this. I know it's going to be a big one. So I'm excited for you.
Thank you very much, Adam.
Yep.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.